The command center in Moscow was a fortress of steel and glass, its windows reinforced to withstand anything from a storm to a missile strike. Outside, the winter wind whipped through Red Square, rattling the old stone buildings like a warning drumbeat. Inside, the air was warm but tense, heavy with the hum of computers, buzzing screens, and the low murmur of officers speaking in clipped tones. General Mikhail Orlov, a man in his late 50s with sharp gray eyes and a face carved by decades of service, leaned over a sprawling digital map projected onto the central table. His hand traced the path of a small, heavily fortified base just beyond the border. Lines of data scrolled endlessly across screens surrounding him. Satellite feeds, drone reconnaissance, intercepted communications. Every detail was monitored, analyzed, cataloged. "We have 3 minutes," Orlov said quietly, his voice carrying over the low chatter of his officers. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. His subordinates, men and women trained to respond without hesitation, felt a chill despite the heated room. 3 minutes. That was all it would take to neutralize the target, a base the world had considered untouchable. The younger officers glanced at one another, some masking excitement, others swallowing unease. One technician adjusted the coordinates on a touchscreen, his fingers moving with practiced precision. Satellite feed confirms thermal readings in all sections of the facility, he reported. No movement in the eastern perimeter. Orlov nodded without looking up. They are blind to what's coming. That is their mistake. He turned toward the large panoramic window overlooking Moscow. The city glittered under the late afternoon sun, a maze of concrete, glass, and steel. Even from here, the hum of life, the cars, the footsteps, the faint echo of voices was a reminder of the stakes. A single decision, a single command, and the balance of power could shift in moments. A soft chime announced the next feed, and Orlov's eyes narrowed. The data was flawless, the timing precise. He straightened, tapping a finger on the table. Prepare. Synchronize all units. In 3 minutes, history will remember the efficiency of Russian strategy. Outside, the wind howled, but inside, time seemed to contract, each second charged with purpose, anticipation, and the weight of inevitability. Far from the bustling streets of Moscow, in a remote stretch of snow-covered forest on the borderlands, the base stood like a fortress carved from steel and concrete. From the ground, it looked impenetrable. Tall watchtowers with searchlights that scanned the horizon, reinforced bunkers lined with armored vehicles, and soldiers moving with disciplined precision. Yet from above, the base was a fragile collection of human activity in a vast, indifferent winter landscape. High in the sky, drones hovered silently, their cameras transmitting live feeds to control rooms hundreds of miles away. The operators in Moscow watched every movement. The soldiers patrolling the perimeter, the armored transports shifting between hangars, the small groups gathering near communications towers. Thermal imaging revealed the heat of engines, the faint glow of living quarters, even the subtle differences in snow disturbed by footsteps. Within the base, the routine carried on as if nothing were amiss. Guards drank coffee in the watchtowers, officers barked orders, and technicians checked systems. A siren wailed briefly, sending a ripple of panic through the soldiers. But it was quickly dismissed as a false alarm. Some exchanged uneasy glances, but most returned to their tasks, confident in the fortress-like security that had kept the outside world at bay for years. Outside, the forest was silent, snow crunching underfoot. No birds sang. The wind carried a biting chill, brushing across exposed skin, but no one noticed the quiet tension building overhead. Russian operators adjusted their consoles in real time, their fingers dancing across keyboards. Target locked, one whispered, voice steady but tight with anticipation. Coordinates aligned. Timing was precise. Every variable accounted for. In the control room, General Orlov's projection of the operation flickered against the wall. A digital map overlaying the base. They have no idea, Orlov muttered, his eyes unblinking. The irony was sharp. A fortress so confident in its defenses, and yet completely exposed to a distant, invisible power. The soldiers moved with purpose, unaware of the orchestration above them, as if they were actors in a play whose script had already been written. The drones circled silently, tracking, monitoring, anticipating. Outside, the snow fell in lazy spirals, covering the frozen earth, hiding the inevitability of what was about to come. The base seemed eternal, untouchable, but every fortress has a shadow, and tonight, that shadow had already reached them. The first hint of chaos came not with a roar, but with a flicker. Lights on the base's perimeter briefly dimmed, as if the world itself had held its breath. Within seconds, the sky above the frozen borderlands erupted in motion. High-precision missiles, guided by satellites and calculated trajectories, streaked silently across the heavens, their paths invisible until they were nearly upon the target. Inside the base, soldiers froze, confusion rippling like an electric current. Alarms blared, echoing across bunkers and hangars, a harsh cacophony of sound that shattered the routine of 1,000 trained drills. Orders were shouted, radios crackled with frantic coordination, but the precision of the strike left little room for reaction. Explosions erupted simultaneously, one after another. Bunkers were consumed in fire. Armored vehicles twisted and crumpled under controlled impacts. Communications towers collapsed like brittle reeds in the wind. Smoke and debris filled the air, curling skyward against the gray winter sky, a dark, choking ballet that turned the once pristine base into a hellscape of twisted steel and shattered concrete. From the control room in Moscow, operators watched with unwavering focus. Thermal cameras showed the interior of the bunkers glowing with sudden heat, tracking the impact point by point. "Impact confirmed," a technician reported, his voice steady but sharp. Every second had been calculated, every strike precise. In 3 minutes, the base that had been deemed invincible ceased to exist as a functioning stronghold. General Orlov did not smile. He simply stood, hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the digital map that now glowed with the aftermath. "Efficiency is our weapon," he murmured. The phrase hung in the room, a quiet affirmation of the operation's ruthless precision. Officers around him exchanged glances, some awe, some relief, but all knew the power of a well-timed strike. Outside Moscow, the wind carried the faint echo of distant explosions across the frozen landscape. The snow, once pure and untouched, now bore the scars of destruction. In the base's remnants, silence replaced the alarms, punctuated only by the occasional collapse of weakened structures. Life inside the fortress had ended as swiftly as it had begun. In Moscow, lights flickered across the command center. A new reality had been written in the snow and steel hundreds of miles away. For Orlov and his team, there was no celebration, only the quiet understanding that power, when executed with precision, leaves no room for doubt. History in these 3 minutes had already taken note. Snow fell silently over the borderlands where the base once stood, thick and undisturbed, blanketing the scarred earth. The ruins smoldered under a thin veil of smoke, the echoes of explosions already fading into memory. Trees, blackened at their roots, stood like solemn sentinels, witnesses to the sudden collapse of what had seemed impenetrable. The winter air carried a bitter chill, but it was still almost reverent, as if the world itself paused to acknowledge the sudden shift in power. Far away in Moscow, the command center remained a hive of quiet activity. Screens displayed images of the aftermath, toppled towers, crumpled vehicles, and the twisted remnants of bunkers. Analysts cataloged the damage with meticulous care, noting the precision of every strike. Yet amidst the technical assessment, a weightier truth lingered. 3 minutes had rewritten a reality that nations had believed immutable. General Orlov stood by the panoramic window overlooking the city, the gray winter sky stretching endlessly above. Moscow's streets glittered with life, indifferent to the distant destruction. He did not speak. He did not need to. The operation had been flawless. But Orlov's satisfaction was tempered by understanding. The power to destroy was only half of leadership. The other half was the responsibility it carried, the burden of knowing that every action rippled outward, altering lives, politics, and history. Officers moved about the room, their expressions a mix of relief and solemnity. Some whispered quietly. Others stared at screens lost in thought. Outside the command center, life went on. Trains rumbled. People hurried through the snow, and the city thrummed with routine. Yet for those inside, the echo of distant destruction was tangible, a reminder of the delicate balance that had shifted in mere moments. Orlov turned back to the screens, studying the patterns of destruction like a masterful painting, each mark deliberate, precise. "Power," he murmured almost to himself, "is measured in moments." The words hung in the air, carrying the gravity of their meaning. Outside, the Russian winter continued its eternal rhythm, indifferent yet immutable, a silent witness to human ambition and strategy. In the days that followed, news outlets buzzed with speculation, images, and analysis. Experts debated what had happened, while soldiers and civilians alike felt the undercurrent of change, even if they did not understand it fully. For Orlov and his team, the mission was complete. But history had already taken note. 3 minutes had changed everything, and the quiet snow over the borderlands bore witness to the inevitability of precision, power, and consequence.